Thank you, Cindy. The Assembly Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Black.
Here.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblywoman Martinez.
Present.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
Chair Flores.
Here. Thank you, Secretary. It appears that all members are present and we have a quorum. Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you all to the Government Affairs Committee. For those of you who are following us virtually, today we're going to hear three bills that deal directly with veterans. And it appears that there is a lot of folk from the community and stakeholders who wish to speak. I wanted to preemptively say welcome to you. Thank you for wanting to participate, and that you know that sometimes we have some technical difficulties. Know that it's not intentional. We try to accommodate everybody so that they all have an opportunity to speak. But if we have any issues, we'll work them out as we do every morning, excuse me. I want to remind members, please keep your mics muted if you're not speaking. Please keep your video on at all times. For those of you who will be Assemblyman Ellison, I believe you were unmuted there for a second. I want to remind those of you who are going to be presenting to please state your name for the record each and every time. And as we're navigating through the bill presentations, we'll refrain from asking questions when we're listening to a particular bill. Refrain from asking questions referring to any other bills. Let's focus on the bill that's in front of us, and we'll take one at a time. With that, we're going to take the agenda in the order it appears. We have Assembly Bill 22, 76, and 77. At this time, I'd like to open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 22. Good morning and welcome, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Flores, Vice Chair Torres, and members of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. This is Kat Miller. I'm the Director of Veterans Services, and thank you for the opportunity to present. Chair, I did have one question. After I present on AB 22, did you want me to pause, or did you want me to do the presentation on all three bills?
We'll take one bill at a time. So
After
you complete that, we'll open it up for questions, and then we'll go support, opposition, neutral, and then we'll close out the hearing and then do that for each one of the bills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, I will start with AB 22. AB 22 would require the Nevada Department of Veterans Services, with support from other state agencies, to develop a State of Nevada Transition Assistance Program, or NVTAP, to assist those being discharged or those already discharged from the Armed Forces of the United States. And this would include members of the National Guard and Reserve, and it would help them to reintegrate back into Nevada communities. Some, not all, but some returning veterans have difficulty transitioning to civilian life. They experience higher rates of recorded disabilities and associated healthcare concerns than previous generations of veterans. And in recent surveys, returning service members indicate that their greatest reintegration challenges are finding meaningful employment, affordable housing, and affordable healthcare. There are many programs that can assist returning service members reintegrate. Unfortunately, service members are often unaware of these programs. The Department of Defense, in partnership with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, does offer a Federal Transition Assistance Program, or TAP, to service members preparing to leave the military. However, this program is not available to members of the Guard and the Reserve. Additionally, federal TAP focuses almost exclusively on federal benefits, providing very little information about state and local veterans programs and services. The limited state information that is offered in the federal TAP is specific to the state where a veteran is immediately ending his or her service, not the location of their intended permanent residence. So for example, they might learn about the benefits that Texas offers if they're leaving Fort Hood, or that Oklahoma offers if they're leaving Tinker Air Force Base, but they will not learn about Nevada programs and services that are essential for successful transition home to Nevada. And I'll give you a specific example. Business and Industry manages a program that is called Home is for Heroes, and it offers a great rate on a mortgage. But if you don't know about it and you move to Nevada and you already buy a home and then you find about it 3 months later, you've missed the boat. So we really need to get this information to our transitioning service members before they come to Nevada, if possible. Many recent surveys show that state programs and services are the most valuable to transitioning service members. At the top of the list are employment, housing, healthcare, and K through 12 enrollment for their children, all programs offered by state and local governments, nonprofit organizations, and private businesses in Nevada. The intent of this legislation is that Nevada offer an in-person state transition program in Clark, Washoe, and Churchill counties, locations where our active duty bases are located, and that they are supported by specific state agencies using existing resources. NDVS would also create an online version so that service members on installations outside of Nevada could learn of these services before leaving service and returning to Nevada. The program would also be valuable to recently separated veterans locating to Nevada. In-person participation would not be required by all agencies. In some cases, they might simply be providing information in the form of existing brochures or online links. Participating agencies could include the Department of Education, Training and Rehabilitation, the Department of Health and Human Resources, the Department of Business and Industry, the Nevada System of Higher Education, and others. In my written comments that I've submitted, I've listed a complete list. And Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this concludes my presentation on AB 22.
And thank you for the presentation. As always, thank you for all the work you're consistently always fighting for our vets. So thank you for your service in that. We have a couple of questions here, and we'll start off with Assemblywoman Thomas.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you very much for putting me out there in the gate first. And thank you, Director Miller. I appreciate your service for our country and with this AB 22. As a service member, when I retired, I was one of those that we're talking about in this bill because the military teaches us how to be military members, but they do not teach us how to reacclimate to be civilians. So thank you very much for AB 22. And you did answer the question that I had, because one of the biggest issues is getting that information to our service members that are thinking of retiring or have retired, and not knowing when, coming to this state or reacclimating to their home base, how or what services are available to them. So this would really be good. And you did say that you would give us that information of those listings of how to get the information to our service members, because that is a big issue. And that was one of my questions that I had for you. And I appreciate you, being in my head and giving that information. Thank you so much.
Pat Miller, for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. Ma'am, first, thank you for your service. And we will absolutely ensure that should this come to fruition, that the information get to all members of the legislature so we can let Nevadans everywhere know about it, and service members preparing to come home.
Perfect. And next we have Assemblyman Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Miller. Appreciate that presentation. Appreciate your service and all you're doing to support those who have served our country in uniform. Love the concepts, behind this bill. Very, very badly needed. I think I kind of alluded to in our when you gave your presentation, I believe it was last week. This bill obviously does a tremendous job of outlining the various services that this department would provide. The only thing it really doesn't touch on is sort of the expansiveness, perhaps, or the scope to which it doesn't, get a whole lot into, funding and costs and all that. And I know there's probably some flexibility there intentionally the way this is written, but I'm wondering if you have a sense of what kind of funding would be necessary to provide these services effectively, and where you anticipate that funding perhaps coming from. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you to the Assemblyman. Sir, starting with funding, Nevada Department of Veterans Services has outreach officers and veteran service officers that have been authorized through the legislature in past sessions. And with these resources, we're able to coordinate with the military installations, with Nellis, with Creech, with Fallon, to ensure that we're, in fact, some initial coordination has already occurred. Ideally, these would occur off post so that the participants offering the information wouldn't have to go through post and do the pass and ID. Poses a bit of a problem. And so you could do it on weekends when they're not working and when family members could be there. So we've given a great deal of thought on how we might offer the in-person. As far as costs, I've talked with our partners and other agencies, and they're already supporting us when we do outreach events. The AG is supporting us, the Department of Health and Human Services, DETR is supporting us, DMV, the County Assessor's Office is supporting us. So we have that support to do the in-person already. And as far as the online, I've jumped ahead a little bit, and we've been in development of an online program. And so we have the data and we've been populating it with the different departments. It's not complete yet, but there is a prototype in place. So I see no additional costs that we would be coming back to the legislature for funding at all. And I will say some of the money has come from donations that we've received from the community. We have an incredibly generous community that supports our veterans. And so I'm not worried about funding for this program, sir.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Next, we have Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you missed my message. Ms. Miller was ahead of me. She answered me already. Thank you so much.
Well, that was nice and easy. Members, I don't know if we do have other questions here. If we can go next to Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you, Director Miller. And this is a great program. I'm very excited. Thank you for the information on it. I do have one quick question. This seems like a pretty large undertaking. So is there a report or update given to an elected or advisory governing body for either to celebrate successes or even to analyze those opportunities to make changes?
This is Kat Miller for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. Thank you for the question. Yes, there is. Nevada has a Veterans Services Commission, which we report out to quarterly, and we give them written and verbal updates on the status. We also have an annual report, which will be published and will be sent to all of the members of the legislature on Veterans and Military Day at the legislature, which I believe is on March 16th, the third Wednesday in March. And that will lay out many of our programs. Of course, since we don't have TAP in place right now, that won't be laid out, but it will be covered in detail, not only in quarterly reports, but in our annual report next year. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
It does. Thank you so much. And through the chair to you, I really appreciate that information, because just sometimes there might be some things that are not necessarily listed in the bill that advisory committee might be able to say, hey, we're not looking at this all the way that we should in some other areas. So I really appreciate that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And Kat Miller for the record, Mr. Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman. There are probably departments and agencies that would be helpful for transitioning members that we haven't thought of. And, we're constantly looking for ideas, what would be helpful for them. And as we have the first couple of groups come through, we plan on doing surveys to say, what would you have liked to have known? We're also doing surveys of veterans. We've already done some that have come back already and said, what would you have liked to have known that you didn't know? And that's informed our initial list of those that we have participating in the program.
All right, members. I don't think I see any other questions, but if you do have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself at this time and announce yourself, please. I don't think we have any more questions from our members. Thank you, members, for your questions. At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 22. Broadcast, please.
To testify in support, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 747. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
This is Andy Lepilbit, last name Lepeilbet, and I'm with the MOPH, DAV, and UVLC. MOPH is Military Order of the Purple Heart, representing our thousands of combat wounded veterans in our state. I represent the 70,000 DAV members in the state of Nevada, and I'm currently the chair of the United Veterans Legislative Council. We support AB 22, especially today it's needed when we've had so many deployments by our veterans, and they come back, they just don't know where to look. AB 22 in the Transition Assistance Program made for Nevada is in a dire need for our veterans and our current military. So the United Veterans Legislative Council, which represents nearly 250,000 veterans and 500,000 Nevadans when you include their families, are in support of this bill. And we pretty much ditto everything that Colonel Miller had to say. Thank you.
And thank you for your service, and thank you for joining us this morning. If we could please go to the next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 300. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes.
For the record,
and may begin.
my name is Tony Yarbrough, spelled Yarvrogh. I am a member of the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, representing approximately 9,000 members, as well as the officer with United Veterans Legislative Council, as our chairman already expressed our numbers, which are very, very large, covering the entire state and all of the organizations within our state. I'd like to ditto much of what Colonel Miller said. I think the director has got this very well captured. I only want to add to that we believe that we know that there are many programs already established to serve our returning veterans. However, we notice also that the initial programs are based on their noted discharge destination that they might write down when they're leaving their command, such as, just to say a name, Arizona. But we also are seeing the changes in final residence is not always being where they initially indicated. So capturing this information and the outreach that's offered by NDVS is a very critical action needed in today's veteran success story. They need to know the services that are available to them, and they need to understand how we can provide the best possible roadmap for the families that they're going to be establishing in our state. I'd just like to say that I'm sure that many of you have veterans in your family history. Many have direct experience of active duty military service. As we move forward, please remember them and the family sacrifices and the commitments to serve our country and how proudly you support them. All we really want is to do the very best for them. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
And thank you, sir, for your service. Thank you for joining us this morning. If we could please go to the next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 158. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Mikey Kelly. I am the chair of the Nevada Democratic Veterans and Military Families Caucus. We are the veterans organization chartered by both the Clark County Democratic Party and the Democratic National Committee's Veterans and Military Families Caucus. I am testifying in support of this legislation. In 2019, then Dieter Director Dr. Tiffany Tyler spoke with the members of our caucus, and one of the things she expressed a desire for was a transition assistance program in order to connect many of the programs that Dieter actually has for veterans in order to provide them with employment information and opportunities. And we were absolutely excited by it. However, with COVID and everything at that sort, obviously this did not occur. But we are absolutely in support of this. There is a need for this. We have not seen veterans necessarily get connected to the support agencies and other entities in the state. We've seen a disconnect, and it is very important for veterans to be connected to these support agencies, as well as to show them that the people of Nevada are truly committed to their success and gratitude for their service. Again, the Nevada Democratic Veterans and Military Families Caucus, as well as the DNC Veterans and Military Families Council, absolutely supports this piece of legislation. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your service, and I appreciate all the work you've done with us throughout the years. I really enjoy working with you, sir. So thank you very much. If we could please go to the next caller.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
We'll come back to see if there's any additional folk calling in. At this time, I'd like to go to those we have on video wishing to testify in support. If we could please start with Ms. Amy Garland.
Good morning, Chair. I'm actually just here to support Director Miller when we registered. She gave our presentation with the Department of Veteran Services. For the record, I'm Amy Garland, Deputy Director of Healthcare Services for the department.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also see registered in support was Mr. Matt Morris, but it's my understanding that you're not wishing to speak. I just want to clarify that that's your intent, to register in support but not speak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Matt Morris for the record, Mattmorris, representing the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. The RTC's CEO, MJ Maynard, has a letter of support on the record for Assembly Bill 22. Thank you.
And thank you. Perfect. It's my understanding that there is nobody else on video wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 22. However, if I am incorrect, please unmute yourself and state your name for the record. Seeing none, at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to speak in opposition to Assembly Bill 22. If we could please go to the cause broadcast.
To testify in opposition to Bill number AB 22, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to go to those wishing to speak in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 22.
To testify in neutral on Bill number AB 22, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Perfect. Director Miller, if you'd like to come back and close out with any final remarks on Assembly Bill 22.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kat Miller for the record, Director, Nevada Department of Veterans Services. Assembly Bill 22 would provide fill a great need for our veterans. There are often people that say, what more can we do for our veterans? What more can we do for our veterans? Nevada has done a lot for our veterans, but if they don't know about it, and by Nevada, I mean the state, the counties, the cities, nonprofits, and local, there are a lot of folks supporting our veterans. But if our veterans and our returning military don't know about those benefits, they might as well not exist. And with that, sir, that concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Director Miller. At this time, I'd like to close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 22. And I'd like to welcome Director Miller back and open up the presentation on Assembly Bill 76.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kat Miller for the record. AB 76 would authorize the Nevada Department of Veterans Services to establish and operate adult day healthcare programs, and it would eliminate obsolete requirements concerning the locations of veterans' homes in Nevada. As background, an adult day healthcare program is operated during the day in a safe, supervised environment that offers healthcare and social services tailored to individuals with physical disabilities or mental impairments. These programs can provide respite care for a family caregiver and can help veterans and their caregivers gain skills to manage care at home. They may also give the caregiver the opportunity to seek employment outside of the home, thereby improving the family's financial situation. Services in an adult day healthcare program can include assistance with daily living activities, physical, occupational, and speech therapies, help with medical equipment, medication management, personal care services, and recreation. A veterans adult day healthcare program has two added benefits over a standard adult day healthcare program. First, culturally competent staff understand how a veteran's military history may shape their health practices and their susceptibility to both mental and physical health risks. And second, these programs provide peer support among adults with a shared military culture, a culture that generally transcends ethnicity, race, religion, and gender. Under NRS 417 Veteran Services, NDVS is not authorized to establish or operate veterans' adult day healthcare facilities. However, veterans and their families often request this service. The VA, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, pays a per diem currently set at $89.52 a day for veteran adult day healthcare services. This per diem makes the operation of an adult day healthcare facility possible without reliance on state general funds. Note that the average cost of adult day healthcare in Nevada is $80 a day, making the reimbursement from the VA more than needed. This would give NDVS the authority to operate adult day healthcare facilities, a first step in seeking federal grant funding for construction, renovation, rental, equipment, or other grant opportunities. And I want to be clear, this bill is not asking for funds to build a facility or saying we're going to. It is just changing the language. Right now it says NDVS has the authority to operate nursing homes. By adding adult day healthcare, you could either expand the programs in the nursing homes to include adult day healthcare in the same facility. You could rent another facility in a location where it's needed. You could construct a new facility. There's all kinds of options. Some of them very expensive, some not expensive at all if you're using existing facilities. But this, by adding this language, I would feel more comfortable going forward seeking the federal grant funding needed to start establishing these programs. Secondly, this bill would also eliminate obsolete language in NRS 417 that discusses where a first veterans home would be built and where a second veterans home would be built. As a first and second home have already been constructed, this language can be removed. It is obsolete. Mr. Chair, this concludes my presentation on AB 76.
And thank you again, Director Miller. At this time, we'll go to questions from the committee, and we'll start off with Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair Flores. Thank you, Director Miller, for this really great presentation. And I love to see that we are moving toward adult day healthcare services for our veterans. I think it's so important that you've identified this as an area of need. And I just have a couple of questions relative to your vision for what does adult day healthcare services look like for veterans. Specifically, have you been working with the Division of Aging and Disability Services or the Division of Health and Human Services? I know that they currently oversee adult day healthcare services for other populations. And so has that been part of the conversations relative to the development of this piece and for state oversight, I think, going forward? And then are you seeing a single location, or would you propose to have community locations so that veterans are able to develop closer relationships maybe with cohorts that are in their community? I'm just curious to know what does that look like for you?
Cap Miller, for the record, thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. On your first question, have we worked with aging and disability? My Deputy Director, who's on the line, Miss Amy Garland, has spoken with aging and disability because we wanted to first make sure that there was a need. And indeed, there is a need. And if I may, Mr. Chair, I would like to bring on Deputy Director Amy Garland to talk to that.
Thank you, Kat. Can you hear me okay?
Please, yes.
Yeah, sorry, it gave me a little message that said my microphone wasn't working, so I panicked for just a second. For the record, my name is Amy Garland, Deputy Director of Healthcare Services for Department of Veteran Services. Through you, Chair Flores, to the Assemblywoman. We have worked actually with a bunch of different state agencies, not only aging and disability, but with GOED for our initial needs assessment to look at where these are needed throughout the state. We also formed what's called a Family Connections Task Force, where aging and disabilities and ombudsman are members of that to identify those needs. So those are bi-weekly meetings, so we're in constant communication to discuss the needs of not only our veterans, but how we can help other Nevadans. Did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you kindly.
You're welcome.
And Cap Miller, for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. Your second part, Ms. Garland answered some of that about where they would be. You know, initially when we built the Northern Nevada home, if you take a look at the map, we had a square set across for adult day healthcare, and I was hoping to have enough funding to buy that, to be able to pay for that, and the money just wouldn't stretch. But quite frankly, the need is probably greater in Southern Nevada, and you could rent a facility that's there and turn it into adult daycare and get the funding from the VA, the grant funding, to furnish, to alter, to expand, to remodel either state buildings or rental facilities. So there are many, many options, and the needs are throughout the state. You know, would we do it all simultaneously? Probably not. We would probably, if approved to do this, and if we were able to get the grant, we would start where the need is greatest. And that would have to be a discussion. We would go back with the HHS and other state partners to figure out where that is. Does that answer those questions, Assemblywoman?
It does. Thank you kindly. If I could just have one last comment, Chair. And just perhaps a consideration relative to the stigma when we call adult day healthcare services. In my experience, many times adults who are in that level of need don't particularly want to attend daycare. And while I understand that it is a language that we're using in an NRS that designates what we're trying to accomplish, that perhaps finding a more inclusive name would be beneficial.
Cap Miller, for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. I could not agree more. The VA calls that in their grants. So, you know, and the term is adult day care or adult day health care, and I hate it. And our veterans will hate it. And be assured, if I have anything to say with it, that will not be the name on the building.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson.
I just gave the best speech thanking everybody, but I was muted. So thank you very much for the presentation. My question has to do with something that you stated about funding and then in the bill, and I realize this is not a funding committee, this is the policy committee. But in the bill on section 1.3, the phrase "to the extent that federal funding is available" always has me very worried because when times are good, people are always getting that help. When times are bad, it's the first thing that gets cut sometimes. And so, but then you also stated that there was no need, or maybe I misunderstood, that there was no need to depend upon the federal funding. So could you explain that a little bit further about the funding mechanism? And I just want to put it out there. I am very concerned about the phrase "to the extent funding is available." It always gives me concern.
Kat Miller for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. Thank you for the question. Right now, I've been doing this for about 8 years, and we haven't had where the VA hasn't provided the per diem. In fact, it's gone up every year. Will that happen forever? I don't know. But right now, the per diem that the VA offers for adult day healthcare exceeds the rate that it costs in a for-profit facility. So let's say the VA money wasn't available, the per diem went away. There's still a huge need for adult day healthcare in Nevada. And so, you know, between Medicare, Medicaid, private pay, et cetera, what we're getting from the initial study, and there's still more to come out, that even should the VA funding not be available, there is a great need for adult day healthcare in Nevada in general. And Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Deputy Director Amy Garland again, because she understands the funding better than me, and I may have said something that I shouldn't, or not included something.
Perfect.
For the record, Amy Garland, Deputy Director of Healthcare Services. She actually said it beautifully. I don't know why she doubts her funding skills, but I'm going to reiterate what Director Miller says. If the VA funding isn't there, not only, the one thing that she didn't add is not only could we do Medicare, Medicaid, and private funding, but there are donations. Our community, a veterans community, is very, very giving and would probably help with this. There is somebody that we'll talk later with AARP that can also speak to the need for these adult day health services. I know that Mr. Charlie Shepard's on and will probably go more in depth in that.
And Mr. Chair, Kat Miller for the record, one final thing, the language "to the extent of," I am not really very cognizant of what the impact of it worded that way is or not. I have no strong feelings one way or the other. I would have to talk to the LCB folks who helped craft it. So I hope that answers the questions.
Mr. Chair, thank you. It does. And I want to make sure it's clear. I do support this the theory of the bill. I think it makes sense. It's just the funding. Sometimes we've got to be taking a look at that. And so I greatly appreciate the clarifications. And I will do some backup with the LCB people about that phrase. Thank you.
And next we have Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues asked the questions that I was looking at, and she did a great job about funding, and then Kat did a wonderful job saying how that there's other fundings out there. I was looking at 3, and I see where it's been deleted all the way down to item 3 on 24 down to 42. But in there, when I was reading that part of the bill, the deleted part, it said Clark County. So this is for the whole state. That's my number one question. This is to anywhere and everywhere. And the other thing is you know, the state on public lands of the public buildings, there's a lot of them buildings that could be still, I think, looked at and purchased, or maybe get the state to donate them for you for some of these facilities. But the main thing is this a statewide operation, and are you guys going to look for outside private funding also to help make this thing work?
Mr. Chair, Kat Miller for the record, through you to the Assemblyman. Assemblyman Ellison, it really all depends on the VA grant process. I mean, if we get sufficient funding to do that, that wouldn't be necessary to have a public-private partnership. If that funding isn't available, then I think we need to look at other options. But right now, states are just starting to apply for these grant funds for adult day healthcare through the VA. And those that have been pretty successful. So it is an option to look at other sources of funding, but right now our primary goal would be to apply for the VA grant.
A follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Please follow up.
I think this is a program that is well past needed. This should have been done a long time ago if we could have, but to come out and tell you, I think this is one of the most important programs you can get right now if you can get these facilities up and running. I know there's some all over the state, but not to this magnitude. So anything we can do to help, I think that's a great idea, and I congratulate you for bringing this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And next we have Assemblywoman Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Director Miller, again, thank you for bringing this bill forward. I really do appreciate your dedication to our veterans. But I am a little confused with your explanation in reference to building. I believe you at first said that, existing buildings, you would house our veterans together if you couldn't have a standalone building. But then you would, look into renting or building a building for veterans. I just want clarification. Are we looking at standalone building? And the reason why I am putting this forward is because we know that our veterans, to be accepted in a multi community of folk might hamper them going into the facility. Veterans usually like to be around veterans, and because of their understanding of the nature of their services and things that they've gone through. And I just want to make sure we're not looking at putting veterans and civilians together for a common cause.
Pat Miller, for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. Thank you for the question. Yeah, let me clarify that there are several options. So I mentioned at first that the grants will cover options, possibly from construction to remodels, expansion, furnishings, etc. So there's a wide variety. If it comes to that point, and I hope it does, my preferences would be, because it'd be faster and less expensive, would be to use existing facilities, state facilities if we had them, or to rent a facility where the need is greatest. There would only be veterans and spouses of veterans in order to get the per diem. You have to be a veteran. So we're envisioning these as being a place where those with shared veteran military culture would be, not a combination. And when I talked about in the same facility, for example, the Northern Nevada State Veterans Home has some property on there. If we were to, in the future, build a building on there, they could share the same physical plant, the dining facility where they make the food, the laundry, the physical therapy. So there's some efficiencies and cost in doing it there, but then there's also other state buildings. In the Southern Nevada home, there's not a place right there, but maybe there is in Boulder City. And so there is nothing on the table saying this is where it would be. But what we know for sure is we want a place that is veteran only or veteran family members. So we have that shared military culture, and so that we can get that per diem, and that we do it wisely. So we use existing resources, not just because it costs less money, but because we get them up faster, because the need is great right now. So if there's an existing facility we can remodel or modify to turn into a veterans adult day healthcare facility, that's where I would rather go. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, ma'am, and I appreciate
my response makes sense. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am, and I appreciate that explanation. And Chair, if I may, a follow-up question?
Please follow up.
Thank you, sir. One of my other questions is, once you have this facility going, will we be able to have wraparound services? Because, you know, there's a great need for, you know, I just don't want our veterans to, you know, play pool and cards and, you know, there are other things that they may need.
Mr. Chair, Kat Miller, for the record, through you to the Assemblywoman, in order to qualify for the VA per diem, you have to have wraparound services. And even if the VA said no, we would. And that includes everything between physical therapy and mental health services to barbershop and getting a haircut. And, you know, the things, because this is not only for the veterans, it's for their caregivers, right? Their caregiver who now has an opportunity to have not only respite, maybe get another job. So what would you need to do during the day to take care of those mental health, physical health, social needs, recreational needs, and just activities of living? All of those would be provided as wraparound services.
Thank you, Director Miller, for your vision. I love it. Our service members would love that too, especially when you mention haircuts. Thank you.
Well, not just haircuts, styling too, you know, because by 2035, 20% of veterans will be women. And so, you know, you need to have a culture that accommodates not only that shared military culture, but accommodates gender specific requirements.
Point taken. Thank you so much.
And next we have Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for this presentation and also for bringing these bills. I just have a quick question on enabling language. Section 1, Provision C says, gives enabling language for federal grants and other sources of money available for establishing veteran homes. Is that language sufficient for, you know, for the daycare, however you want to, you know, just call that? Is that language sufficient? And does that also allow for gifts or other sources of funding to be used for this as well? I just want to make sure that that language is wide enough or correct enough to make sure that you can bring in other sources of funding.
Thank you for the question, Kat Miller. For the record, I believe it is, but I'm going to go back and check it again just to make sure. There are other parts of NRS 417 that allows us to use gifts and donations for the operation of nursing homes. I think by adding that language there, the lower language takes care of that. But Mr. Chair, if I may get back with LCB and just to make sure that language is inclusive.
Sounds good, Director. I'm also going to ask our legal to jump in. I'm sure that she could provide some further insight.
Hi, Erin Sturdivant, Legislative Counsel Bureau. The language doesn't appear to be specific to these veterans' healthcare programs, but I do want to confirm that as well by reviewing the chapter. To the extent that the committee wants to add language that specifically references daycare programs, we can certainly make that change. Thanks.
And Director Miller, obviously the committee would work with you, but I believe that the lens that the members are coming from is just they want to ensure that we.
Chair, you're currently muted.
Uh-oh, thank you. Director Miller, what I was stating is that I'm sure the committee members will work diligently with you. At the end of the day, the angle that they're coming from is they want to make sure they can maximize the amount of sources of income that are available to you to ensure this program works. So with that, members, do we have any additional questions? If I skipped you, please feel free to unmute yourself now and announce your name. Seeing none, at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 76. Broadcast, if we could please go to the line.
To testify in support of Bill number AB 76, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 747, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chair, this is Andy Lepelbit. Last name Lepeilbet. And I represent our combat wounded veterans with the Military Order of the Purple Heart, of which there are thousands in our state. I also represent the Disabled American Veterans for Nevada, of which there are 70,000 according to the Veterans Benefit Regional Office. And I am the current chair of the United Veterans Legislative Council, where we have approximately 250,000 veterans in our state and about 500,000 when you include their family members. We fully support this adult daycare for veterans. We do have a unique personality, as most of you know, and being together and shared visions with each other. A lot of our older veterans and disabled veterans, younger ones, they're being taken care of and helped by their families, and it's difficult to work when you don't have somewhere. And some of them need this adult daycare desperately. I understand it's a bigger need in Southern Nevada. Certainly that's a bigger population for us as well. But we ditto everything that Kat Miller and her staff have said, and we totally support this bill. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your service, and thank you for joining us this morning. If we could please go to the next caller wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 76.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 158, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Mikey Kelly. The last name is spelled Kelly. I am the chair of the Nevada Democratic Veterans and Military Families Caucus and the state director of the DNC Veterans and Military Families Council. I testify on behalf of the caucus as well as the council in support of this legislation. However, we want to add a couple of comments to this. First and foremost, we want to make sure that this facility, when opened, is not a privatized facility, and that the facility is operated and staffed by Nevada state employees, Nevada state union employees, so that we can ensure that it's completely government operated. We absolutely oppose privatization. The second part of this is and I'm echoing the words of our senior veteran in the Nevada Legislature, Senator Pat Spearman. One of the concerns that we've seen throughout the certain aspects is racism within VA facilities. Just recently in 2020, there was a study by the American Psychological Association where several of their trainees who had trained in a West Coast VA facility that was unnamed had reported issues of sexism. 65% of their trainees who had trained at the facility from 2012 to 2018, 65% had experienced racism. 65% had experienced sexism. 54% had experienced racism. 50% had experienced anti-LGBTQ bias perpetuated by veterans and staff. And also 45% feared repercussion for reporting those type of events. We've seen a lot of this in different facilities across the country where there has been racism, sexism, and anti-LGBTQ bias. If this facility is operated, we would like to ensure that there is an appropriate number of Black, Indigenous, people of color staffing the facility, as well as a commitment to root out and stamp out any type of racism and bias that exists in these type of facilities. Again, we testify in support, and we wholeheartedly ask that you support and pass this.
And again, thank you for calling in. At this time, if we could please go to the next caller wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 76.
Caller with the last three digits of 300. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chairwoman and committee members. Again, this is Tony Yarbrough, spelled Yarbrough. I am in support of AB 76. I represent the Veterans of Foreign Wars in the state of Nevada, as well as an officer with the United Veterans Legislative Council. I would like to speak in support of the Veterans Adult Daycare. I think it's a very important program to provide a caregiver a real break to refresh and rebuild their ability to care for their loved one. Properly trained associates with wraparound services would obviously place a lot of confidence in the caregiver. Moreover, it exposes the caregiver to potential new information through on-site NVVS training, which could lead to an employment opportunity if so desired. And additionally, we think that the cleanup language for NRS 417 is appropriate to clarify the status of the veterans' homes. With that, I appreciate your time and thank you very much.
And thank you. If we could please go to the next caller wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 76.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. If we could please go to Linda Dickinson, wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 76 via video.
Yes, my name's Linda Dickinson. I speak from my experience as a nurse, a veteran, a caregiver, and an advocate for veteran services. Many veterans do not want to ask for help. They don't want to be a burden. A veterans adult daycare program could give the outreach needed to assist our elderly and homebound veterans in an environment where they could feel comfortable and receive care that could help them maintain their independence and dignity in their home and family environments. Many of our veterans now have caregivers who may be limited in their own physical capabilities and or still work. In addition to spouses or significant others, these may be children or even grandchildren who are caring for the veteran. It may also be parents or other family members of our younger veterans who require care. If we had a veteran adult daycare, this could provide and enable the veteran to receive care, giving the caregiver security that their veteran is being cared for while they're at work, or as mentioned, just needing respite care. It would also provide the care to help these veterans achieve a better improvement of their activities of daily living. And many veterans benefits are specific to either the military disabled veteran or those who have retired. A veterans adult health care daycare would benefit all veterans as well as their families. I thank you for your time and the ability to speak in front of this committee. Thank you.
And thank you for your remarks and your service. We appreciate you joining us this morning. If there is anybody else wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 76 who wanted to do it via video, please unmute yourself and state your name for the record.
Mr. Chair, Chairman Flores, Chairman Flores and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Charlie Shepard. I am the state president for AARP. AARP strongly believes that everyone should have access to affordable quality healthcare, and adult day healthcare is an extraordinary example of a valuable healthcare service. You have heard about what adult day healthcare provides and how this service provides necessary help to both the client and their family. The respite it provides families is just as important as the socialization and health services for the clients. Having a veteran-specific facility will also help ensure that the veterans feel comfortable as they all share common experience. Currently, veterans who seek adult day health care have to either pay out of pocket, which is expensive, or get services via Medicaid. There is currently a waiting list for Medicaid home and community-based services, and having a veteran-specific adult day health care provider would allow the veterans to get the service more quickly. This could actually shorten the waiting list for those non-veterans on the waiting list for Medicaid-funded services. This is truly a win-win. The fact that veterans should be able to attend without requiring any state funding is another win, because state funding will stretch further. AARP Nevada, on behalf of our 345,000 members across the Silver State, supports Assembly Bill 76 and encourages the committee to pass it to take care of our veterans and their families who have served our community. Thank you, Chairman Flores and committee, for allowing me to speak in support of AB 76.
And thank you, sir. If there's anybody else wishing to speak in support that I may have accidentally skipped, please unmute yourself and state your name for the record. Seeing none, at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to speak in opposition of Assembly Bill 76. If you could please go to the phone lines.
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 76, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to speak in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 76.
To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 76, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Director Miller, if we could please have you come back and any closing remarks you may have.
Thank you, Chair Flores. Cap Miller for the record with closing comments. Mr. Chair, if I could, I would like to address a comment that Mr. Kelly made, because I think it's really important. And I'd like to reinforce in my closing comments how important we consider respect for others. And in fact, in our patient bill of rights for our veterans homes, every one of our residents is required to receive treatment and care without discrimination as to race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, sexual orientation, source of payment, or age. And this same Bill of Rights would be applied to any state of Nevada operation for adult day health care. And so I'd like to thank him for making that on the record and giving me the opportunity to say how important that is to all of us in the Nevada Department of Veteran Services. And the other closing comment I'd like to make is just to repeat that this is not a budget item at this point. It's just the authority, and that gives us the opportunity to go forward, and that there is no, this must happen first and this must happen second. Adult day healthcare, if there was an interest in the community and there was the need after we get the final result from GOED, we could pursue multiple grants for different areas at the same time. So I'm very excited about the potential for this. This is something our veterans ask for a lot, and more so our caregivers. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my comments, and I stand ready for any additional questions.
Great, thank you. I don't believe we have any additional questions for you at this time. Again, thank you for the presentation, and I'm sure the members will up on figuring out if we could help with gifts ensuring that you can accept gifts and other forms of support for the program. At this time, I'd like to close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 76, and I'd like to go to our final bill hearing and open the presentation on Assembly Bill 77. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cap Miller for the record with the Nevada Department of Veterans Services. I'll be presenting on AB 77, which revises provisions concerning the Department of Veterans Services and certain advisory public bodies related to veterans. Specifically, this bill would revise duties of the Director of the Nevada Department of Veterans Services to capture significant and essential duties already being accomplished. And it would change terms of members of 4 veteran advisory commissions and committees to standardize the number of years for which members are appointed. I want to start with director's duties. NDVS currently creates, coordinates, and supports suicide prevention and homelessness programs with existing staff and resources. These issues, suicide prevention and homelessness, have been top concerns for veterans and their families for the past decade. However, they are not listed in the Department Director Duties section of NRS 417, even though there is mention of other at-risk and special populations, such as women veterans, LGBTQ veterans, veterans suffering from MST, etc. Adding these duties to NRS 417 Veterans Services codifies what is already in practice. The duties already being accomplished but not captured are to connect veterans experiencing homelessness to housing and to organizations that provide housing support to decrease homelessness among veterans. And then secondly, create, coordinate, and support programs and resources for the prevention of suicide among veterans, including without limitation, programs and resources to increase knowledge of how to recognize the signs of potentially suicidal veterans and resources to which veterans who are potentially suicidal may be referred. The next proposal in AB 77 regards commission and committee term lengths. There is one Veterans Services Commission in Nevada, the VSC, and 2 Veterans Advisory Committees, one for each one of our cemeteries, one in Fernley and one in Boulder City, and 1 Women Veteran Advisory Committee. And these are all established in NRS 417. The VSC and Cemetery Advisory Committee members are appointed for 2 years, and the Women Veteran Advisory Committee members are appointed for 4 years. The Veterans Advisory Commission believes that 2-year terms are too short for significant service and result in turnover, disrupting continuity of operations. A longer 3-year term would develop expertise and awareness among board members. 50% of the VSC and cemetery board members turn over annually. According to Board Source, in their 2017 report on board practices, boards should ideally turn over no more than 1/3 of the board seats annually. Moving from a 2-year to a 3-year term length will keep that turnover to the 1/3 goal. And with 2-year term lengths, the governor's staff must appoint or reappoint 10 to 11 members annually, creating significant workload and resultant appointment delays. Adopting a standard 3-year term would reduce that workload and the associated vacancies to 7 appointments a year. Now, the Women Veteran Advisory Committee 4-year term does allow for continuity of operation and minimizes appointment process workload. However, the 4-year term is not optimal because it's important to bring in new members to generate fresh ideas and bring on members with different cultural viewpoints, skill sets, perspectives, and networks. Adopting a standard 3-year term would support a culture of inclusion and innovation. Finally, NRS 232A, appointments by the governor to public bodies, establishes a general requirement for appointments of 3 years until their successors have been appointed and have qualified. While NRS 232 Alpha does not limit additional requirements such as those in 417, after a review of the statutory responsibilities of the Veterans Commissions and Committees in NRS 417, I can determine no special circumstance that would suggest a need to deviate from the general term length requirements in our NRS 232 Alpha. Chair Flores, Vice Chair Torres, and members of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs, this concludes my presentation on AB 77, and I stand ready to answer any of your questions.
And again, thank you for your presentation, Members, at this time, I'd like to open it up for questions. And we'll start off with Assemblywoman Anderson.
Good morning. I really like questions. What can I say, Mr. Chair? And thank you, Director Miller, for bringing this forward. I have two questions. They both have to do with the commission itself, because your explanation as to why we need to expand the number of years that they're in makes total sense to me. My first question, and by the way, love the new language in T and U. Great language for both of those. But when it comes to the commission, under C, when it states that one member is a student at an institution of higher education, has that been an issue for them to be for 2-year terms and 3-year terms? Do you see a possibility of that becoming a problem? That's my first question. And I do have a second question as well that's not related to the student that serves on that commission.
Mr. Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman, the student is also required to be actively in school, enrolled, and be a student. And occasionally we'll have a student that graduates before the end of the term, but then they're no longer eligible. And we let the boards and commissions know. The Veteran Service Commission chair in each one of their quarterly meetings reviews the status of the student to make sure they're still actively in school and when they plan on graduating, so we can alert the Office of the Governor that an appointment will be necessary. So that's interesting that you bring that up. That's the one position that has not only the term length by year, but they must be actively seated. Now, there are some other requirements in there. For example, you have to be a member of a nationally recognized veteran service organization for some of the positions. And should you no longer be a member of an actively recognized national or state veteran service organization, you would no longer be eligible to be on the board too. So that would be another area where you, that would trump the period of time in terms of years. Does that answer the question, ma'am?
Through the chair to you, yes, it does. And thank you for that clarification, because I can totally see where the student is coming from and why it's important to have them, but also the problem sometimes with somebody graduating or somebody getting near their degree and finding the balance. My second question has to do with who serves on the advisory committee already. Is there a variety of individuals from the different conflicts and different timeframes? I showed this to a friend of mine who is a veteran, and he really liked it. It's like, this is a great start. But as he stated, as a veteran of the Korean conflict, the experiences he had are very different, vastly different than the individuals who are coming from the Afghanistan or even Iraq situations. So is there variety of those individuals? And is there a consideration of trying to make sure that we've got people from different conflicts?
Kat Miller, for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. By statute, there isn't a requirement to look at the different eras of service. However, in practice, that is absolutely looked at. Anyone can apply, go online to the governor's website and apply to be on a board, a commission, a committee. But the chair of the Veteran Service Commission and the chairs of the cemetery committees and the Women Veteran Advisory Committee will send a letter into the commission making their recommendation. And that recommendation, since I've been here, has always included not only different eras, but diversity in terms of ethnicity and diversity in terms of gender. And then there's also been other considerations. So there's 2 positions that are members of the public. The committees have generally asked that they have a family member, a Blue Star mother, father, or a Gold Star parent, because they represent the interest of the families. So the boards, every single meeting that they have, every quarterly meeting, a standard item on there is appointments, so they can talk about who's coming up, who might be the best person. Again, it's the governor's decision who he appoints, but he does get pretty significant feedback from these boards and committees about who they think they should represent in order to have that diversity. Right now on the boards, we have a pretty good diversity on the VSC in terms of age and different eras. On the cemetery advisory boards, not so much, but they're only 5-person boards. 2 of them come from the legislature. So you've got 3 positions left, and they tend to be people who are retirees and spend a lot of time at the cemetery and love that cemetery, and it's part of their life. So I don't think you have a lot of younger people applying for the Cemetery Advisory Committee boards. On the Women Veteran Advisory Committee, there is a diversity in terms of era, for sure. Does that answer the question, ma'am?
It does, and thank you so much for such a thorough answer.
And next we have, thank you, Assemblywoman. Next we have Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair Flores. Thank you again, Director Miller. I think my question is relative to my colleagues, as we just received a presentation on the boards and commissions and the number of vacancies throughout the state of Nevada. I'm curious to know, are there term limits for these boards and commissions? Is there a specific number of terms any one appointee can serve as a maximum?
Kat Miller, for the record, ma'am, there is not a term limit for the boards under NRS 417 at this time.
Members, do we have any additional questions? If I skipped you on accident, please unmute yourself and announce your name. Seeing no further questions, when Director Miller comes back up at the end, you'll have an opportunity at that time again to ask questions. At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 77. We'll start with our phone lines. Broadcast, please.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 77, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 747, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chair and committee members, for the record, my name is Andy LePelbet, last name L-E-P-E-I-L-B-E-T, and I represent the thousands of combat wounded veterans in Nevada with the Military Order of the Purple Heart, the 70,000 disabled American veterans in Nevada, and I'm the current chair of the United Veterans Legislative Council, and we are in support of Bill AB 77, specifically the language in terms of suicide prevention. A lot's being done. I am a current member of the Governor's Challenge for Suicide Prevention, and it's being led by Kim Donahue with NDVS, a critical element in our state with all ages of our veterans. And the stabilizing and standardizing of the terms makes it easier for everyone to understand who's sitting in what seat in all these commissions and boards. So the UVLC, with its 250,000 veterans and 500,000, including their family members, we are in support of this bill. And thank you, Chair and committee members.
And thank you, as always, for your service, your commitment to vets. If I could please go to the next speaker on the line wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 77.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 158, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mikey Kelly, last name spelled K-E-L-L-Y. I am the chair of the Nevada Democratic Veterans and Military Families Caucus, as well as the state director for Nevada for the DNC Veterans and Military Families Council. I testify in support of this legislation. Again, one of the things we have been concerned about, and also in talking with our partner organizations, such as Minority Veterans of America, as well as organizations like Common Defense, we ask that these boards and commissions always reflect the diversity of the veterans community. Oftentimes, younger veterans and veterans of color are ignored in membership on boards and commissions. Some of that's because they don't apply, because they are not aware of the opportunities. So I would urge, when we are promoting these boards and commissions, that we reach out to a wide variety of veterans, that we cast the net far and wide, and ensure that we are hearing opinions from all different types of veterans, from Black, Indigenous, people of color to LGBTQ veterans. Again, I testify in support of this legislation, and I'd urge that the committee pass this as it's submitted. Thank you.
And thank you again, Mr. Kelly. If we could please go to the next caller wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 77.
Caller with the last three digits of 300. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, Chairwoman. My name is Tony Yarbrough. That's spelled Y-A-R-B-R-O-U-G-H. I represent the Veterans of Foreign Wars in Nevada, approximately 9,000 members, as well as an officer with the United Veterans Legislative Council. I would like to state in favor of support of this bill that I think that these changes are very appropriate and modernizes the responsibilities and is quite timely considering our environment in today's world. So I ditto very much what has already been said, and thank you very much.
And again, thank you for your commitment to our veterans. If we could please go to the next caller wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 77.
Caller with the last three digits of 955. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. I'm Mike Musgrove, M-U-S-G-R-O-V-E. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Veteran Service Commission representing the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I'm here in favor of AB 77 concerning the terms of appointments for the Veteran Service Commission and cemetery boards. When we have a new member appointed to the board, there's always a learning curve, especially if the new member does not keep up daily with the issues concerning veterans in the state. During a 2-year term, the new member is just coming up to speed. A 3-year term would allow this member to become well-versed in the procedures and issues of the board or commission. Setting the appointments so there would be 1/3 due each year will ensure that there is still a core that is familiar with the matters at hand and provide a training base for the new appointees. The business of advising the director is very important to the veterans of this state. We that serve on these commissions and boards take the responsibilities seriously. The training and knowledge gained helps us provide the best advice we can to the director to ensure that the veterans of the state have the best access to veteran services provided by the Department of Veteran Services and the federal government. Those of us whose appointment is due during the year the legislature meets face delays due to the workload in the governor's office during those times. With every other year citizens legislature, those are very busy times for all branches of government. With fewer appointees to boards and commissions during that time, the workload on the governor's office would be reduced some. And I understand that NRS 232A allows for 3-year appointments, and they would be appropriate for the veterans boards and commissions. I stand in full support of AB 77. Thank you for your time this morning.
And thank you. If we could please go to the next caller wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 77.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
At this time, I'd like to invite those who are on video wishing to speak in support of Assembly Bill 77 to please unmute yourself and state your name for the record. It's my understanding we didn't have anybody via video, but I wanted to make sure that I did not accidentally skip somebody. Seeing none, at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to speak in opposition to Assembly Bill 77.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 77, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to speak in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 77.
To testify as neutral on Assembly Bill 77, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Perfect. Director Miller, if we could please have you come back and any closing remarks you may have.
Thank you, Chair Flores. This is Kat Miller for the record, Director, Nevada Department of Veteran Services. Final comments on AB 77. I really feel strongly that these two duties need to be added to NRS. Most veterans, most service members that come back home to Nevada integrate very well. But there are a small percentage that struggle. And people that give 3 to 30 years of their lives to protect our country and the people of this country, the least we can do is make sure that we throw everything we have at the problem of suicide prevention and homelessness. Our veterans shouldn't be suffering that. And we do have those programs in place, but I think codifying it makes it very clear our commitment as a state to addressing those important issues. And as far as the boards and commissions, we could continue the way we are, but it's just not effective. It's not efficient. And standardizing it to 3 years will not only improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of our boards, it'll reduce the workload on the Office of the Governor. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my comments on AB 77. I stand ready for any additional questions.
Thank you, Director Miller. I'm sure members will reach out, and members, for those questions that were asked broadly that we did not have an answer to now, I'll be sure for our committee manager to share that information with everybody as we get it. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 77, and I'd like to invite you to speak in public comment.
To take your place in the public comment queue, please press star 9 now. Chair, the public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Understood. Thank you. Members, I want to remind you that for tomorrow, we have two presentations. We won't be hearing bills from the City of Henderson and City of Sparks. I anticipate the meeting being relatively short. And today I'd like to adjourn in honor of Mental Health Awareness Day. As you know, we're doing that today here in the Legislative Building. I think it is a very proper and necessary conversation to have after having had this conversation about our veterans and how we often have failed them when it comes to this conversation. So I just wanted to adjourn, remind folk to reach out to your family, your friends, check in on each other. It's important. And as always, thank you to all our women and men who have done the ultimate sacrifice and continuously sacrifice so that we can continue to ensure that have the beautiful things we have in this country. So thank you. This meeting's adjourned.